Motor learning and motor control. Motor learning is the study of the acquisition of motor skills. This means it is the study of how we teach our bodies to do things. Motor control is the study of how the nervous system controls movement. These two subjects are closely intertwined. As motor learning or skills are increased, the subject's motor control becomes more precise. Claudius Galen first delved into motor control with the hydraulic model around sometime between 129 and 199 CE. He called the hydraulic fluids animal spirits. In the mid-1600s, René Descartes proposed a second hydraulic model, which was accepted until the late 1700s when the bioelectricity model was introduced. Around 1780, Luigi Galvani demonstrated that electric currents actually made the muscles contract. Cerebral localization. The first empirical effort at cerebral localization was made by Franz Joseph Gall. Gall noted that the differences between unusual talents and striking differences in facial or cranial appearance. Gall believed there was a link between the level of ability and the size of the area of the cerebrum. Marie Jean-Pierre Flourens shot down Gall's theory by discovering that motor control was controlled by the medulla oblongata and the cerebellum. Gustav Frisch and Eduard Hitzig made the next breakthrough by demonstrating that if you electrically stimulate one side of the cortex, it resulted in movements in the opposite side of the body. Theoretical developments in motor learning. Early studies on motor learning focused on performance and not on the factors of learning and retaining the skill. During the 1920s and 30s, researchers in the psychology field began to focus more on the learning and the teaching of skills. In 1927, E. L. Thorndike published The Law of Effect, which stated responses that are rewarded will be repeated, whereas responses that are punished will be extinguished. During World War II, the military put a push on motor skill in order to find the best pilots. 1943, C. L. Hull published the General Learning Theory, which had a great impact on understanding motor learning. Hull's theory was later proved incorrect. In the 1960s, the discipline of motor learning really started to come into focus. Franklin Henry, Arthur Slater Hamill, and Jack Adams all developed motor skills dedicated university labs. The first scientific journal dedicated to motor control and learning was published in 1969 by the name of Journal of Motor Behavior. The 1970s saw a number of theories being introduced. The multi-level movement control theory breaks the neuromuscular system into levels. Each level is tied to certain physiological structures, therefore controlling different movements. The supplementary motor cortex was involved in planning. The basal ganglia initiated movement. The motor cortex determined which muscles to use. The cerebellum would control fine motor skills. The lobus levels were the muscles, tendons, and sensory receptors. In the open-loop control theory system, the higher systems are in charge of planning, selecting the muscles to be used, and the output of efferent signals to the lower levels. An example is Schmidt's motor program theory, which states that from practicing motor skills, they can be stored as motor programs that control the action without peripheral feedback. Schmidt believed these programs were localized and could control groups of muscles to perform activities such as throwing and kicking. The closed-loop theory stated that both afferent and efferent information is used to control muscle action. Like the open-loop theory, the closed-loop theory states that the higher centers plan and initiate action, but it also states that sensory receptors make appropriate adjustments to the original action plan. The other major difference from the open-loop theory is the need for a reference mechanism in order for the motor system to detect errors from the original reference. The dynamic pattern theory focuses on the coordination between components within the nervous system, using the principles of nonlinear dynamics and the chaos theory. Patterns of coordination change as a function of some outside variable called the control parameter. An example of this would be going from walking to running while on a treadmill. The treadmill speed would be the control parameter. So as you increase speed, the body would make small changes in order to correct your movements. Theories of motor learning. Adams introduced the closed loop theory in 1971. He stated we form a reference of correct movements called a perceptual trace from repeated practice trials. Early on in the perceptual trace is weak but increases as the correct movements are practiced and repeated. Knowledge of the results provide error information so that the correct actions can be employed. After a great deal of practice, it is stored as a reference mechanism.
Riders ready, watch the gate. Riders ready, watch the gate. Random start. Riders ready, watch the gate. Ready, watch the gate. Riders ready, watch the gate. Random start. Riders ready, watch the gate.
Shown was an example of practicing in order to create a reference point. The more you practice, the more the timing came to be consistent with the timing of the gate's fall. The schema theory. Learners acquire rules for producing movement and evaluating performance for certain situations. The recall schema is the rule used for producing movement. It is developed learning that relationship between the parameter used in the generalized motor program and the outcome of the action bases on the knowledge of results. Recognition schema is used to evaluate those results. It is developed by acquiring the relationship between the sensory feedback and the outcome of the movement. So the recall schema is used for the action, and recognition schema is used to make the adjustments. EEGs identify the electrical activity of the brain. It is used to study the brain activation patterns in athletes. PET, or positron emission tomographies, functional magnetic resonance imaging, and transcranial magnetic stimulation is just a few examples of technology used in motor control and motor learning. Educational preparation. A person working on a doctoral degree would usually be mixed in with another program with an emphasis on motor learning and motor control. These programs are usually housed in the kinesiology or exercise science departments. A master's degree would be housed in the same area along with being part of another program such as kinesiology or exercise science. People taking a master's degree route usually continue on in other areas of training. Many teachers and coaches will take master's level education classes in motor control and motor learning to help their students. Employment opportunities include college or university settings, applied fields such as coaching and industrial settings, and are also a basis for physical therapists.